really, it's cool to speak and to get to choose the music and just get exactly what I want. And I just got exactly what I wanted. So thank you. The power of we is what I'm talking about this morning. The power of we. And of course that song so beautifully illustrates it, as did the one we sang before, Weave, that we indeed need each other. That's one of the powers of we. But where this came from is, I guess it was 3 or 4 weeks ago maybe, Glenn was, I think Pat was giving the talk, so Glenn was the one leading us in prayer for our challenges. And he said, I'm going to probably misquote him a little bit, but it was something close to this. I was scratching it down on my program as quickly as I could. He said, make no mistake, this is not an exercise in futility. This is a power beyond what we can imagine when we come together in prayer like this. Whether or not we see it right away, the work is being done. And I just felt that just hit me in the heart like an arrow. This feels good. Coming together feels good, but it's more than just about feeling good. It's about when we come together and set an intention as a community, the work is being done. And we may never see all of the fruits of it, but we can be sure that that's what's happening. And this isn't just a spiritual idea. It's sort of known just colloquially. I started, as I was sitting down to write, just thinking about all of these different colloquialisms that came. 2 heads are better than one. There's strength in numbers. Yeah. Many hands make light work. Yeah. The more the merrier. United we stand. Divided we fall. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Yeah. And also, one is the yeah. Yes. So that's kind of where this came from, is Glenn talking about the power that we have in prayer in community. And I talked a few weeks ago about how each of us as individuals has every single element of God in us that God has. In the same way that a drop in the ocean has every single element of the ocean that the whole ocean has. There's nothing missing. And yet a drop is not the ocean. When we come together, we are the ocean. We are that. We are that powerful when we come together with the Spirit of God within us and among us. The kingdom of heaven is among us in that moment, just as Jesus spoke about. So the scripture that came to me, of course, right away was this one from Matthew. I tell you the truth, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, I tell you that if 2 of you on earth agree about anything you ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 come together in my name, there I am with them. And I read that, and I've heard that so many times, and there's some problems with it. I'm going to talk to you about it, or I've sort of perceived. But I like this this translation that's in the Message, which is a newer translation. Take this most seriously. A yes on earth is a yes in heaven, just like Pat talked about before. And no on earth is a no in heaven. What you say to one another is eternal. I mean this. When 2 of you get together on anything at all on earth and make a prayer of it, my Father in heaven goes into action. And when 2 or 3 of you are together because of me, you can be sure I'll be there. And I don't think that means, when I was a child in a fundamentalist church, the meaning I kind of got out of that scripture was that if I was all by myself, I couldn't count on God to be there, that there had to be 2 or more gathered. I guess that was why it was important to be at church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, sometimes Saturday afternoon. But I don't think that's what this is saying. It's not saying that when you're alone, you don't have God. It's saying when you're together, you harness such a power. It's a flow of energy. That's what prayer is. It's a flow of energy. And when we engage in prayer as individuals, we align our energies with the energy of the one. When we engage in prayer as a community, we align our energies with the energies of each other and the one. So this is powerful, what we do here together, but what we do in small groups is also powerful. And it's not, I don't want to say that as an individual you don't have just as much power to pray as a group does, but there are things that we do for each other energetically and just, who among you doesn't act better when you're in a group of people than you do when you're just all alone in your family, okay? That's one possibly unintended consequence, or maybe Jesus knew exactly what he was talking about. Witnesses, thank you. You have witnesses. When there's a group, you have witnesses. But that's really important because it's that in the humorous way that's important, but also we have witnesses. You're heard, you're seen, you're validated. And I think that that's one of the really important things about praying together is that it helps to focus the energy. When I pray alone, it's easy for me to, my mind to go off on my laundry list. When I'm praying with someone, I feel a certain responsibility to that someone, and I tend to be more focused, I have to admit. And to be more focused means that I have to actually know a little bit about what it is that I want, what I'm praying for. Now, I'll tell you, I'm not a goal setter. I don't say, I'm setting this intention, and I put all my energy toward it, and I'm going to treasure map, and I'm going to pray, and then that's what's going to happen. Because I've been proven over and over and over again that God's plan for me is actually better than the plans that I try to have for myself. So I try not to tell God what to do when I pray. Yeah, I try to say, okay, God, I have identified my heart's desire, and if this is what you will for me, I am ready. I consent. I open. And when I have, I have a couple of prayer partners, one in particular that I religiously, so to speak, pray with every week. We call each other. We talk on the phone for about an hour. He doesn't live in town. We check in with each other, where we are spiritually, where we are emotionally, and in our lives and relationships. And then from that check-in, we call forth, what is it that you want prayer for this week? He says to me, Melinda, what do you want prayer for this week? And I'm able to identify. Sometimes it's just, I want to be able to relax and be in what is without having to worry about what will be. Sometimes it's that simple. But having another that prays that with me and for me is very, very powerful. And I have come to know that when I do that, God never lets me down. I'm never alone. I'm never without power. And what happens is always it's not just that it's exactly what's supposed to happen, because that happens anyway, but I'm in alignment with what's happening. So I get out of my own resistance, I get out of my own fear, I get out of my own anxiety, and I get into alignment with what's going on. The other thing that praying in a group does, it gives us some accountability. If you continually pray for something and the actions you take are in direct opposition to what you're praying for in spirit, then, your prayer's probably not going to work, because you're sending God two different messages. And your behavior prayer is probably stronger than your spoken prayer. And so having somebody that I'm accountable to, having a group in my life that I check in with, having friends who are spiritual friends who will call me to account, who will mirror for me who I am and what it is I'm doing in the moment, is very important. And also they provide me with a measuring stick. There are times when I talk to a spiritual friend, someone I've prayed with in the past, and not been in a really good place, and I've had someone say, wait a minute, now a year ago, here's where you were, and here's how you were feeling, and here's what you said you wanted, and look where you are now. You're there. Sometimes it takes somebody else to point that out to me, because I want to go, woo, poor me. So those are all things that can happen in community, in prayer, with the power of we in prayer. And even when we're not in conscious prayer, I really love the word communion, Holy Communion. You know, and I looked it up in the dictionary. Communion means the act, first definition, the act or instance of sharing, as in thoughts or feelings. Second definition, religious or spiritual fellowship. And the third is a body with common faith who practices the same rites. So I always thought growing up that communion meant you had to, you were drinking the grape juice and eating the matzah. But but communion is the coming together. That is the important part. It's the coming together. So when we sit down to have potluck together, that is Holy Communion. Holy Communion. And the togetherness in ceremony and rites. When we perform a ceremony, ceremonies are just symbolic. They're just ritual. And I tended always to believe that they didn't have much power in and of themselves. And yet, when there have been people over hundreds of years doing the same ceremony, imbuing it with meaning, then when we partake in that same ceremony, in that same ritual, it can be imbued with the meaning of all of the energies that have been put into it. I've gone to, and I'm never been even close to a Catholic person. I've been close to Catholics, but not to being a Catholic myself. And yet when I go to cathedrals in Europe, I always go in and have some meditation time and light candles for people that I'm thinking of. And that was not a ritual I was brought up with. I just kind of heard that. I probably saw it in a movie sometime. And so I knew what the candles were for when I went in there. And it has been so meaningful to me to be able to do that, to sit down in that space where thousands have sat, and to light a candle and to hold a prayer that is no different from what thousands have held. So sometimes the coming together that happens in ceremony is bigger than what we can see with just today, because it's imbued with years and years of we-ness. And in Harmony, at Harmony Fellowship Church, I think we're really fortunate to have a pretty good understanding of this, of what it is we're here for. I like that the original intention of the people who came together, not to make a church, but who came together, came together to have community, came together to have spiritual community. And then this is what grew out of it. This was never the intention of the people who came together. They just missed being with people in a spiritual context. And so they got together and started doing it, being with people that they loved in a spiritual context. And this is what has come of it so far. It's pretty exciting. So we have an understanding of that in here, and I love the fact that our services are so prayer-based, that we pray together intentionally and weekly, and that we pray together during the week as well. And I know that the prayer chaplains are praying over what's in the box. I know that Glenn and Pat are praying what's in the prayer box. It gets sent to Silent Unity. Speaking again of ritual, they've been in continuous prayer for like 110 years or something like that, well over 100 years, that your prayers are being prayed over by groups of people. So that is some of the power of we. The power of we. In Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12, it says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. And that's part of the power of we, just like in the song Lean on Me that we sang a few minutes ago. When we are in we instead of in I, when we fall down, we have someone to pick us up. And when someone else falls down, we're there to be able to pick them up. I heard Mary Manon Morrissey speak several years ago, and she tells this story about when she was a very young girl, and she was pregnant. Then she was kind of on the fast track. She was the cheerleader. She had the straight A average. She was going to college. She was doing all this stuff. She became pregnant, and her family just kind of went, okay, you're out of here. and she was at a very, very low place. And someone came to pray with her and she said, I can't pray, I don't believe. And I can't remember who the woman that was that came to pray with her. She said, I tell you what, I'll believe for you. We'll pray together and I'll believe for you. And she talked about how powerful that was when she wasn't able to believe, that this woman believed for her. And I've been able to do that for people in my life. Because you know what? It's a lot easier for me to believe how wonderful you are than it is for me to believe how wonderful I am sometimes. And so we can do that for each other. We can, when I can't see the Christ in me, I can see it in you. And when I see it in you, then you get to reflect it back to me. And I'm just seeing several people in this room that I have that regular relationship with, that we see the Christ in each other on a regular basis. And it makes a difference. It makes a difference. And when you're in community, it's important to let people help you. I've talked about this before. That's one of the hardest things, you know? It's a lot easier sometimes to give someone help than it is to allow the vulnerability that we have to experience in order to let someone help us. And I would hope today, and we'll pray about that in a little bit, have a meditation, but I would hope today that maybe there's a little crack if you're one of those invulnerable people, that maybe we can put a little chink in your armor so that when you have a need, if there's a load you have to bear that you can't carry, call me. Call someone. Call someone. We are here. That's been my experience. When I've been absolutely alone with no one, it's been because I haven't reached out, not because there was no one there. And Chris Chenoweth, in one of his daily Positive Christianity writings this week, said something about, when you are feeling alone or lonely, that's the time to go, oh, I'm not connected, and just take a moment and breathe and say, God, I know you're there, and I know I'm here, and therefore I am not alone, and breathe it in. A moment of loneliness is a perfect opportunity to connect. It's a perfect opportunity to connect. And if it doesn't do it for you in that moment, if the loneliness is such that you can't connect with God out there somewhere or even God in here, then connect with God with skin on. Call somebody else and let them be God for you. And this is the power, I believe, of, and I've shared before that I've been in a 12-step program for a long time. One of the most powerful things about that program, if you're familiar with the 12 steps, is they all begin with we. We admitted, we came to believe, we made a decision, we made, we. And the power in that is, one, that there are those who have gone before, that you're not just reinventing the wheel. You're not starting from scratch. There are those who have gone before and made a way for you. And I also love that it's in the past tense. We made a decision. We came to believe. Not we're coming to believe. We came to believe. It is done. It is done. And now all I have to do is follow that path. And of course, the we says most of all that we are not alone and we can avail ourselves of help. One more thing I want to talk about in this we-ness. I say to the choir all the time, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And no more, I think, is that illustrated any better than in a choir. Here's a whole bunch of people who have different voices, different levels of singing ability, different levels of confidence, different levels of profound fear. And when we come together and raise our voices in a joyous noise, then what comes out is way more than this plus this plus this plus this plus this. What comes out is miracle, magic, harmony. As far as I'm concerned, all those things mean the same thing. Miracle, magic, harmony. So the other power in we-ness is that this is just a sociological truth, that when enough people join together, a tipping point is reached. So a new thing starts to happen. When enough people do a new thing, then that new thing becomes the new paradigm. And this works for good and for not good. When I talked about how you behave better in the company, in company, well, it depends upon the company you keep. There are people I behave worse around. There are people in my life that I realized that our whole relationship was really based on gossiping. And I've had to lovingly, without judgment, let go of those people. Not let go of them. I still love them. I still pray for them. I still hug them when I see them, but I don't make lunch dates with them. Because I know that when I get done with lunch, I'm not going to feel that good about myself. So be careful of the community you're in. I guess I just want to say that. And then those tipping points happen for good or for evil. But when we come together to cultivate the energy of love, when what we are doing is a loving thing, then eventually, and that's what all of the spiritual writers of today, everybody, you go to the spiritual section of the bookstore and you pick up any spiritual book, and this is what they're all saying, is that the planet is evolving, that we are on our way, that we are raising consciousness, that the planet's consciousness is being raised. And I attended a webinar the other day from a school in New York called One Spirit, where I'm hoping to go to seminary. And this guy, Kurt Johnson, was talking about hope for the planet and saying how we're all in boxes. And as individuals, sometimes we put ourselves in boxes, but definitely as religious traditions, as denominations, we put ourselves in boxes. And boxes always only divide. And getting out of it in the boxes, we are thinking we are separate, but the truth is we are not separate. And he believes, and these spiritual writers, that so many of them that I've read, believe that we are breaking out of those boxes, that that's what we're doing, and that part of the horror of the news today is that we're having growing pains. And I really hope that that's the truth. I really hope that that's the truth. I don't know where the planet is heading, but I know that it's my responsibility as someone who understands that we are all one, and as someone who understands the importance of cultivating that energy of love, that it's my responsibility to do that in every moment and in every place that I can. It's my responsibility to get out of the box. And it's maybe my responsibility to come up to your box and wave over the edge and say, hi, I'm here. I'm here, come out and play. So finding commonality, with someone who's very different from you, that's a way of joining in community. That's the way of helping the planet to reach a tipping point. When we look for our differences, we will find them, always. When we look for our commonalities, we will find them, always. Always. And sometimes we look at somebody and we go, I don't want anything in common with them. And I get it. But it's even more important to find the commonality when it's someone that you don't want to like, when it's someone that's not easy to love, when it's someone whose beliefs you do not understand, that you cannot comprehend. There are certain people running for public office right now that it boggles my mind. I cannot understand it. I cannot understand it. And all I know to do is either sit in a corner and weep or stop watching the news and send love as often as I can. Whenever the thought of fear comes into my mind, to send love. To send love. And to know that all hatred, anything that seems like hatred, is really fear. And so when people are acting hateful, instead of responding to their hate, let something within me respond to their fear. Because I want to comfort a fearful person. I want to beat up a hateful person, which is better for me. Okay? Nothing about them. What's better for me? Beating somebody up or being in a position where I want to comfort? So it's about how I can be the best person that I can be. It's about how I can best sleep at night. It's about how I can live with myself, and joining in community in that way, in looking around me wherever I am and finding the commonalities rather than the differences. That is the power of we. That is the power of we, and I believe that that is the way and the only way that the planet will be healed. Thank you.